Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Humphrey. Today's chapter break episode features James L. Peters and his latest publication, The Dancer and the Swan, which came out August 2025.
James is a Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin author of contemporary fiction. James began his career in television production and moved on to all forms of marketing and advertising, always with a writing and creative focus. He also avidly pursued music. Between 2003 and 2007, he and his wife left careers, sold their home, and focused on music, performing across Wisconsin. We're going to have to ask you about this, James. During this time, James wrote two novels, Shrugging and Turntable. His third novel, Fortune Falls, was released in 2024. He has been published in collegiate literary journals and most recently in the Midwest literary magazine Barstow and Grand.
Let's take a look at The Dancer and the Swan. This is the story of Pauline Swanson, a recovering alcoholic who volunteers for a hospice program. She's assigned to Deborah DeeDee Deneaux, a 76-year-old Creole woman in the final stages of pulmonary sarcoidosis. A bond develops between them as Pauline learns about DeeDee's sprawling life story, her childhood in the 1960s New Orleans, her provocative adventures in the 1970s San Francisco, and her success in 1980s Chicago. Pauline is plagued by the shame of her past and haunted by an early childhood trauma. The Dancer and the Swan is a historical drama against the backdrop of urban renewal and social change, as well as an exploration of survival and forgiveness in the lives of two strong, unique women.
Sounds amazing. Welcome, James, to Midwest Writers Room. How are you doing today?
Oh, wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh
You bet.
yeah, we're absolutely glad to get you on. So before we even talk about the book, as Lola said, we gotta derail a second and kind of dig into this. Let's drop everything, honey, and go on the road and make music. Talk us through that.
Well, that's a long story. I'll try and make it as short as possible. We were in a band. I've been in a band since I was 16 years old. Ironically, we just never played live. We were a studio band. We did a lot of recordings, big theatrical kind of music. And boy, it was 2002 that we decided, you know what, we're going to kick ourselves in our 50s if we don't try it just once. So we did. We over the course of that year, we prepared to quit our careers. We sold our house. We sold pretty much everything that we owned. We rented a 100-year-old farmhouse on the west side of town, right off of I-94, with the lead singer, and started performing. And we said it would be a 5-year plan. And at the end of 5 years, it was time to call it quits. And we were just lucky enough to fall back into careers. But it was a great experience, you know.
No kidding. That is so like just brave and cool.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Like, let's just jump, and there's no safety wire. Let's do it. That's
You had a
Yeah.
cool.
plan, you had a 5-year plan. So there was some safety, you had it was like a little experiment that you did. And I mean, I just think that's so cool.
Yeah. And I mean, it did give me time to write my first two novels. The second one, which was loosely inspired by our experiences. So,
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, that brings us full circle now to this one. Let's talk about this book. How did it come about? Where's your genesis for this one?
yeah, I honestly, I can't even tell you. It has almost become a mystery to me. I was working on my fourth novel, which was not this one. I was about 13 pages into it, and I was sitting outside on a Sunday afternoon with my wife, having a cocktail, and suddenly I turned to her and said, "I'll be right back." Ran in, got a pen and paper, came back out, and wrote what I thought at the time was going to be the first line of this novel that I never thought that I would write. And essentially, it was a character that has appeared in two of my other books who said very loud and clear, "You are not done with me yet. You need to tell my story." And so it's like, oh no, I'm not prepared for that. But somehow, some way, I hope, I feel like it managed to come through, and it came through hard and strong. So
So there are some themes throughout this book. What themes are you focusing on? And if you can, talk us through why it was important to have these in.
Yeah. So really, the main exploration of this novel is exploring the similarities and differences between shame and grief. And those are actually two different things. And these two women really go through the nuance of those differences. And in particular, Pauline, she needs to recognize that she may be mistakenly putting guilt on herself instead of recognizing that it's unwarranted shame. Um, and but beyond that as well, I was just intrigued at looking at two lives, very different, and yet at pivotal points in their lives, were facing similar decisions, and each of them went a different course. And in that way, that's where Pauline can kind of find strength and reconciliation with herself by seeing how someone who went a different route yet didn't carry the baggage of it.
Interesting. Let me ask you: did you write it first person, third person? What's the tense?
So I wrote Pauline in first person present, and DeeDee's story is told third person past.
Okay.
And I am not an omniscient writer. I do not like omniscient, so it's all third person. So you're just in the head of the individual and what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. And as such, not always 100% trustworthy as as narrators.
So your man writing from a female perspective, was that a conscious choice? Is just that how the story spoke to you? And what was that like?
Um, Terrifying. I honestly, to this day, I have no idea why I decided to do this. It seems completely inappropriate in so many ways for me to write not one, but two female character leads, one of whom is a 76-year-old Black Creole woman. That seems so ridiculous. And yet, like I said, I don't know where this came from. It developed organically, and it just felt like something that had to be told, and I just did the best possible job that I could representing these two women the best way possible. And the all I can say is I had, since most of my readership tends to be women 40 to 70, so far all of them just have said I had to keep looking at the top of the page and see your name because I couldn't believe a man was writing this. So I'm going
That's
to take that
impressive.
as a compliment and hope
Yeah.
that in the long run I did justice to these two people.
Well, and I
I
think
feel
there's
like the
you learn.
attitude is half of the battle there. You know what I mean? Like the fact that you are humbly attempting this and therefore, trying to sit in other people's shoes, in that sort of mindset versus, the all confident, I've got this attitude, which is
Yeah.
where people, I think, get in trouble.
I think it does also help that throughout it's kind of funny. Just the other day in a literary group, they were asking what was one of the first books suggested to you that really made an impact. And I said, really, one of the first ones that I can think of was a grade school assignment, seventh or eighth grade, to read The Scarlet Letter. And that was the first novel that really had quite an impression on me. And Hester Prynne, I mean, to this day, has been one of the most important characters that I have ever experienced. So much so that, that is a tiny little reference in the book as well. But Jane Austen, one of my favorite authors, Margaret Atwood, one of my favorite authors. And, these people didn't necessarily write uber strong, authoritative women. They were women who had concerns, and but they had fortitude. They had persistence, and I guess that has just always stuck with me. The and that is the other thing that I really wanted. If there was one other theme to The Dancer and the Swan that's really important to me, it's female empowerment and their pivotal role in informing society, and in particular, a compassionate society. And that's dealt with whether talking about the hospital sisters, which is a segment of the novel, talking about the primarily female leadership of the Black Panthers in the 70s, and with these two women themselves.
Very good. Let's just talk a little bit about publication then. This is not your first book. Did you follow the same path to publication, same publisher as your other ones, or what was that like?
Yeah, so I do self-publish. I had tried for years to get agent representation. Got close once, but it just didn't work out. And by the time, so I self-published the first two more as a vanity, just to say I'd like to have these, and maybe some family and friends would enjoy them. But they were a little bit more popular than I thought that they would be, and so had to do a lot of reprints. That's when I started to access KDP, Amazon. So in my third novel, I didn't spend a lot of time trying to get representation, and just decided, you know what, I'm going to just continue to self-publish, and that one did quite well locally, and was a top seller at one of the local stores here. And so when I finished The Dancer and the Swan, I literally just poked at about 3 or 4 different agents just to give them a shot, but I was kind of always geared toward self-publishing this one as well.
All right. Luella, shall we?
Yeah, you bet. As with all chapter break episodes, we're going to have James read a little excerpt from The Dancer and the Swan. James, when you're ready, maybe share where in the novel you're starting to orient the listeners, and then take it away when you're ready.
All right. So I'm going to read the beginning of chapter 2, which is titled Wrath of God and Man. This is right after Pauline has first met DeeDee at her senior apartment, and is starting to ask about her past a little bit. So this gets into DeeDee's third person past narrative. The music played, the TV cameras dollied and tracked, and DeeDee danced with 5 other girls on a Saturday afternoon in 1968 to Tommy Jane's and the Shondells, while thousands of teenagers watched at home on Channel 4. 10 years of dance instruction culminated on that point. Exhaustive training, 2 years at Kelly School of Dance, followed by 4 years at Nord, and over 2 years at Tony Bevanetto's studio. Handpicked by Mr. Tony to be spotlighted that week as one of John Pila's Tony Bevanetto dancers. And DeeDee wanted to be anywhere but there. She wasn't naive. She knew all about what it meant to be Black. Papa and Maman educated her in the challenges and roadblocks. That's why they sent her to St. Mary's Academy for Girls. That's why they enrolled her in dance school at age 6. You're Black in America, Papa would say. You don't have the luxury for childish things. No loafing or lolling about your days. You have to be graceful and smart. You need to work 3 times as hard to earn half as much. But you're also Creole. We help build this city, and we Deneaux work hard, and we don't abide excuses. They had Creole neighbors who white passed, leaning on their fair skin and straight hair, but the Deneaux bloodline was only lightly thinned by French blood. DeeDee's paternal grandparents were born in Haiti, brought over by their parents, whose ancestors were freighted over in chains from West Africa via the transatlantic slave trade. The 7th Ward was her entire world, so New Orleans had always been a welcome home for her, and DeeDee felt the pulse of its heartbeat. There was never any question that the city was hers and she belonged there. Dancing on that bright decorated soundstage with 5 white girls and a white television crew and mostly white high school choreographed steps, she felt out of place for the very first time. That must have been how Ruby Bridges had felt, 6 years old, being escorted into the all-white classroom of William J. France Elementary School for the first time. Ruby had been a hero of hers growing up, 3 years younger, but she seemed so much braver. Inspired by Ruby and the 3 other Black girls who were integrated into the other public school, McDonough number 19, DeeDee started to resent going to her all-Black, all-girl private school. She hated wearing the blue woolen A-line pleated skirt and those black and white saddle Oxfords. She wanted to do something heroic, and heroes didn't wear clown shoes. Although most of the white parents pulled their kids from classes with the Black girls, and even the teachers resisted, Ruby stuck it out at W.J. France Elementary. The McDonough 3 stayed for a couple years at McDonough, then they were moved to different schools to integrate. Ultimately, after facing horrendous abuse and severe bullying, their parents ended up putting them in Black segregated schools. And now, here was Deborah Deneaux, a Black Tony Bevanetto dancer on the John Pila Show, a show that itself had only recently allowed any Black high school dancers a few years prior. DeeDee was finally following in Ruby's steps and realizing how little it felt heroic and how much it just felt humiliating. But DeeDee danced like she never had before, in perfect coordination with 5 girls who barely acknowledged her existence otherwise. Growing up in the 7th Ward and a student at St. Mary's Academy, it was easy to be spared the hostilities of the world. She had lived mostly isolated among those who were like her. And New Orleans was always seemed different. It wasn't Alabama, where just a few years prior, hundreds of people tried to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma for their right to vote and were met instead by police batons and water cannons. It wasn't Mississippi with its flames of racial hostility. New Orleans wasn't even really Louisiana. It was its own world where its Cajun and Creole, African and Central American populations were an integral part of its culture and development. During her childhood, there had been a relative and long-standing harmony among all races and peoples in New Orleans, even if there wasn't equality. But things started to change as the civil rights movement spread across the land. Papa and Maman would talk about it sometimes. They warned DeeDee's brothers, 3 and 6 years older, to take care, that the winds of change were blowing. And although George and Alfred were both in Black-only schools, they were young boys full of piss and vinegar and more prone to trouble, especially Alfred. The white culture of New Orleans felt threatened and was starting to push back hard against the gale force of integration and equal rights. They may not have minded their Black folk giving the city some color and culture, and they may have abided a certain amount of success and limited freedoms, unlike other Southern territories, but not while sharing the same spaces. And so, on that Saturday afternoon, in a live broadcast on WWL-TV Channel 4, Deborah Deneaux danced, but really, for the first time, she was dancing solely as a Black girl in a white world.
Yeah, so that excerpt, when we read the synopsis, I really love history. I feel like as human beings, you cannot understand your world unless you know how we got here, at least some of it, right? It really struck home how much, you mentioned in the synopsis, the 60s of New Orleans, the 70s of San Fran, and the 80s of Chicago, and you really could feel it in that excerpt, some of that New Orleans history. Was
Yeah.
that just how was that like really high? That must have been really kind of fun to research and sort of go through, or
It was intimidating. I have always only written what I know. And this was the first time that I really stretched out beyond. So I have never done as much research as I did for this novel. And it was so interesting learning. And I am not someone who plots out my novels. I'm very character driven. And in this case, the history itself really helped to drive where the novel was going. The issues of urban development, for example, was not something that I planned to spend a lot of time on, and yet it became such a crucial element and such a driver of the novel. that it really kind of took over many segments of it. So yeah, it was very enlightening. I think I also had to, ironically, or not ironically, but interestingly, I had to do a lot of research on 1970s and 80s marketing to minorities with franchise restaurants. And I actually read a Pulitzer Prize winning book that was called Franchise, the history of franchising to Black audiences. That really helped guide me a lot on where I was going to find my other research, because it encompasses so much of the history of that time as well. So yeah, it was
Sounds like a real, sorry, I was going to say, it just sounds like a real personal journey for you too.
yeah,
Like you really learned a lot just writing the
yes,
book, which I think that's great.
yeah, absolutely.
One thing I always like to, especially with historical fiction, is when they've got, anchors to names and places. So naming schools, the television station name, whether they're, real or not, it just adds this another layer of reality to it instead of just saying a school. You got the actual specific name of the place. And so kudos on that one. That's good.
Yeah, it was something that I had to realize early on. I use real people when they're periphery, when they're background to the story. But if someone is actually involved in the story, I made someone up based on them. And that's how I held through. But there's quite a bit of a fair amount of historical characters in there as well that are referenced, and then a couple of people who are based on actual people, so that you can get a real feel of the true history of that, even though the scenario is fiction.
Cool. Very cool. Tell our listeners where they can learn more about you, and where they can buy the book.
Oh, sure. So I do have a website. It's just www.jameslpeters.com, where you can learn about all my books and this one. It is available on Amazon as paperback, hardcover, or ebook. The hardcover comes with a bonus short story, so for what that's worth.
Nice. That's a nice touch.
Yeah.
So any book signings or appearances on your docket?
Yes. So in the Chippewa Valley area, on September 6th, I will be at Dragon Tail Books in Menominee, downtown Menominee. On Thursday, September 18th, I'll be at the local store in downtown Eau Claire from 6:30 to 8. And I'll be at the Chippewa Falls Public Library on Tuesday, September 23rd, from 6 to 7.
Perfect. All right. Well, I want to take this time now to thank James for coming on, to introducing everybody to The Dancer and the Swan. For everybody out there hanging with us in the Midwest Writers Room, thanks. I'm Ken Humphrey.
I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room is written by Michael Ramir C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.